Hey guys, welcome back to Cult of Man. I'm Kyle, and today I have an illustrious guest, magnanimous guest, amazing guest, someone I've known for over a decade. The gentleman sitting with us today is a historian, lawyer, lecturer. He is a philosopher, and he is an author. And I am incredibly lucky to also my friend. Let's give a welcome to Mr. James Stevens Valliant. Jim, how are you?
I am fantastic, sir. Thank you for that amazing introduction. And it is one of my great honors in life to call you one of my dear friends.
Well, thank you, sir. Thank you. I've known Jim for I think over 12 years now. Actually met him through social media. Jim can talk on any topic. He is a wise, learned sage in my life, and really, in so many ways, Jim, you are one of the impetus for why the podcast even exists. While I did have a strong interest in philosophy before I met you, that philosophy and my own process of integrating, this sense of philosophy into my life largely came as a result of your incredible generosity and your passion for ideas, your willingness to give me the time of day and address all of my, I'm sure at some point, tedious questions about why. And so I owe a massive debt of gratitude for all of your expertise, your kindness, your time, your intellect, your wisdom over the years. So thank you.
Wow. Thank you. I have learned a great deal from you, sir. It's gone both ways.
Awesome.
So yeah, people can see from the gray hair, I do have a few years on you, but that's it, my brother. We're brothers. And it's my privilege to be here.
Yes, and one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, in terms of the scope of this podcast, really is just me and Noah talking about our firsthand experience in life and trying to offer some perspective, wisdom, whatever we can to people that are interested in living better, growing, evolving better, really just living. Well, I guess discovering their value. Moment here, discovering their values, finding the courage to go after what they want in life, be willing to make mistakes, to fail, but to always persevere. And you're one of those people to me that you're such a renaissance man. It seems like you have excelled in so many different areas. And I'm sure that there were times where you had difficulty and so forth, but you kept going. And I thought, who better to have as a guest on the pod than you? Now, all that said, one of the things I'm seeing a lot of, and any of us that are either directly or tangentially plugged into what we call the manosphere, which has super very healthy aspects, like Chris Williamson and Andrew Huberman and these folks, Tom Bilyeu, these folks that are all about self-improvement and getting better, to the more twisted, darker, sinister side of what Red became. And I'm noticing not just certainly in a lot of younger men that I know, but even men that are, 30s, 40s, 50s, I don't know, there is sort of a darkness that has descended on men in particular that haven't figured out their purpose, haven't figured out a passion in life and gone after it. We see the rise in things like depression and anxiety and, different types of metabolic dysfunction. And it leads me back to what I learned from, or began to learn from objectivism about almost 25 years ago now, that people need a guide. But it doesn't seem as though as many people understand that they need some type of guide to their life as people who need it. And I'm wondering, based on your experience, your expertise, why is that? Why are we in this space in the culture now where we have people falling by the wayside and just pulling out of society, that they're resigning themselves to just playing video games, smoking weed, and not necessarily challenging themselves? At the same time, we also have a renewed fitness culture. We have a renewed sort of the men's self-improvement space has really blown up a lot over the past 5 to 10 years. And I'm curious on your perspective. I'm sorry, I'm talking too much here.
Oh, no, that's really fascinating. Well, to start with your main point, I think there in the middle is why we need a guide for life and, the importance of philosophy. And this is true for everybody, not just men. But I
Hmm.
want to add something about what you just said there about men in today's culture, though, too. Philosophy is important and inescapable because whether you're an auto mechanic, a medical doctor, or a truck driver, I don't care what you are, the questions philosophy asks are inescapable for everybody. Everybody's got to have some answers to the questions that philosophy uniquely asks. Let me give you a couple examples. No matter what you want to know, the question is how you know it. Now, some people will go to their psychic, go to a horoscope to figure it out. Some people will go by what their friends are doing, what other people tell them to do. Some people will do it the way we've always done it, the way dad and grandpa used to do it. Some people, and of course, it's a discovery that self conscious reason will try and go by the evidence and logic and be rational. I had a great dad, and one of the best things he ever did for me, the one most common phrase I remember from him, he would tell me as I was growing up as a boy, Jimmy, think it through. Think it through. And what a great piece of advice that is. And he was teaching me, in effect, philosophy. He's saying use reason and use it consistently and rigorously and self consciously. And if that's the message, I go by reason. But you see, most people are grab bag mixtures. Some people will go by their feelings. Some people will go by social pressure. Sometimes they'll think it through if they think it's important. Most people may be a mixture of these things. But the point is, people have a method of knowing. There's a how we know to everything, no matter what you know, no matter what you do. In order to act, we have to have some confidence in our knowledge. And to know anything, we have to have an answer to the question, how do you know? Well, I'll use a fancy word, epistemology. That's
Right.
one of the branches of philosophy, how we know. Give you one other example. Um, I need to judge people. I don't want to do business with a crook or a fraud. I don't want to go into business with someone I can't trust who's a thief. I don't want to have a personal relationship with some toxic narcissist. I
Right.
want to, so I need to evaluate people. I need to judge people. And there's all kinds of practical things I learn as I grow up, even before I become a self conscious philosopher. You know something, Kyle? The only way I'm ever going to earn your trust is to be consistently honest. If you catch me in a whopper and all it takes is one or two, have every right to distrust me thereafter. So I realize that to earn your trust, which is of great value to me, I've got to habituate honesty and be an honest person. Value question, and this doesn't matter whether I'm a doctor, a lawyer, again, a plumber, all humans face this. So
Right.
you ask, why is religion so universal? And why is religion? Because humans, even primitive humans, before we knew a lot, we need some kind of philosophical guidance. Religion is crude, primitive, canned philosophy. And some philosophy in some form is inescapable. Inescapable. It's really the modern world that has put rational thought on the map self-consciously. Humans had to discover that. Humans, we're s- we're born completely ignorant. What are we?
Right.
We're not even babbling until we're several months old. We start walking around one. We can get potty trained around two. I mean, we're still pooping our pants until we're two. You look at baby ponies that come out the day they're born. They're prancing about.
Right.
Humans learn everything. I mean, talk about a men's issue. I remember the day I learned where babies came from and how sex happened, and was a total revelation. I
Right.
couldn't have been more surprised. What goes where? How? What? Huh? Is
Right.
that what? Humans don't even know how to reproduce. We are born with no knowledge. We have to learn everything as human beings, and this includes how to learn. And so the question of, say, epistemology, this includes, what are my values? Should I devote myself to getting into heaven and become a monk and take an oath of celibacy and poverty like monks and monasteries do? Should I be a whim worshiper hedonist? go by my feelings, smoke pot all day, have as much sex as I can find, and should that be my approach in life? Or what is an actual long-term self-interest, for example? Only philosophy can sort of answer any of these questions, and that's why it's universal. Now, it's not a guy monopoly. We sometimes think, oh, I'm the guy, and therefore I'm the rational, logical thinker, and no,
Right.
this applies to women, and I think that's one of the key messages I'd give to guys is that it applies to all of us,
Yeah.
including women. They have minds of their own. If
Mhm.
you have respect for yourself, a respect for your partner, you're going to respect her independent judgment. And
Mhm.
this applies to each and every one of us uh, because we're humans. Philosophy is inescapable. It asks universally inescapable questions. And some of the most important questions that'll shape our own psychologies and the rest of our lives. Our success as guys hinges on these kind of questions. Our success as humans hinges on these kind of questions. And it applies to our girlfriends as well as to us.
Yes. Yes.
That's
Yes.
the point.
It's, one of my favorite quotes. One of my favorite quotes from Rand is, you can evade reality, but you cannot evade the consequences of evading reality." And that just proves that you need some type of a guide, because if you can decide to, worship your whims, you can, just to follow your emotions, you can ignore, the realities that are in front of you, but you can only do it for so long. You have to deal with reality on its terms. And it seems to me that what we've ended up with so many more men, whether they be young men or middle-aged men, sort of checking out, or just doping themselves with weed, video games, sex, liquor, you name it. It's a massive level evasion. That there seems to be there's an idea out there that, well, if I don't try, uh, I can't fail and feel bad about it, so I just won't try at all. And that's like the antithesis of living. You're not taking any action. You've decided not to think at all. And that's what concerns me the most. Is, I guess, thinking is volitional. You have to think. And how do we get men and women, all people, to better understand, okay, maybe what I'm doing isn't working. Oh, I do need this thing called philosophy. That seems to be the more difficult question.
Well, old religions lose their traditional hold on people. And when secular philosophy says there are no answers, you can't be
Right.
sure of anything, and who could know anything? There is no objective right and wrong. And that's what they get from so much of philosophy. Academic philosophy has failed in terms of its practical responsibility. It is, as I just said, the single most important field of knowledge, and yet it is the single field of study that is in absolute chaos. If you were to ask a philosophy professor today, what is the importance of your subject, they'd say it has no practical consequences. It has no relevance to human life. And none of our answers seem to be giving any practical guidance or confidence. And so let's look at the two. You've got someone who's been either you're turning your mind over to some religion, some ancient religion, and going by that guidance, and you're going to be filled with, I mean, the modern world. I mean, good luck living the Amish life. Or you'll have this attitude, and so many do. I know how to win. I won't give a crap. If I don't give a shit, then no one's going to. I don't know what the language rules of your
That's fine.
podcast are. If I don't care, I've won. I have the victory of not winning. But no, 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 no. You see, that's the reflect. Both reflect a worldview. Both reflect a worldview that's, say, the second guy, he doesn't have confidence he can control his life. If he believed he could actually make a difference, his choices, his values, what he thought could matter to what he did, and what he did would matter to his long-term well-being, then you and I, of course, could say to him, dude, you're killing yourself. You're just hurting yourself. You're not doing yourself any favor. You get this little emotional victory because you don't give a crap. Okay, that's an internal emotional victory that uses philosophy as a rationalization to sustain itself. Similarly with religious people, they don't know the if I obey God, if I just turn my mind over to God and do whatever God says. But then, of course, that has them believing all the other, these primitive ideas that are completely unworkable in the world today. What we need is self-conscious philosophy. We need self-conscious. Take the concept of masculinity itself. Old religious approach to that had a very dogmatic and what I would call an intrinsicist view of male versus female. It wouldn't recognize the social, man-made parts of that. It wouldn't recognize, for example, that men and women fundamentally have all the same features. What we're talking about here are basic, you know, focuses and certain features that are more dominant than others. They're not there. They're intrinsicists. Men are men, women are women. The husband's the boss. The woman, okay, that's your traditionalist values over here. If we don't have an objective set of psychological and moral values over here, how do we define masculinity and what that really is? Because, see, I need, like I was saying before, a healthy relationship is one of equals, of one of mutual admiration, one where we respect one another's boundaries, one another's selfishness, and that's what love is.
Right.
Meeting our partner's selfish needs. That's what we want to do because we love them. And so,
And we should probably, and we should, maybe, for those that aren't as familiar with our school of philosophy, that aren't familiar with objectivism, I think that maybe we should define our terms. When we're speaking in terms of selfishness, we're not thinking in terms of I'll do whatever I want, I'll sacrifice anyone and anything to what I want out of my life. Far from it. We're operating from selfishness, properly understood as rational self-interest. That I will not sacrifice myself to other people, nor will I sacrifice to myself to achieve my ends.
okay,
Did
I was a
I do
dude
that
who worked.
adequately?
Yeah, well, I was a dude who worked in law enforcement for almost 18 years. I was a public prosecutor, a DA. And talk about a situation where you learn philosophy and the real impact of it in a very, very immediate way. You see the operation of philosophy on a day-to-day, life and death, huge consequence basis. I'd be walking past the jail with some of my law enforcement buddies, and they'd say, "Yeah, the jail is filled with all these selfish people." And I would look at them like, "What are you talking about? These
Right.
are the most self-destructive people in our community. They are parasites, these thieves, who people don't want to deal with them. They have to do it surreptitiously. These are violent people. When the bullets start flying, they're likely to get injured. They're not making any friends out there. Drug addicts. They're committing suicide on the installment plan. All those junkies in there. So these are the most self-destructive people. What is in your actual long-term self-interest is not obvious. Most people don't even think about it self-consciously. But if you think about it, only philosophy can help us do that. In fact, one of the important parts of philosophy is to really clarify that exact issue. How can I maximize my long-term well-being? Well, in order to do that, I must think conceptually, I must think in principle, I must think long term. In fact, to say someone even knows what's in their long-term self-interest is a huge compliment. If I were to say someone's selfish, now talk about upside down from what most people think of. The behavior most people think of as selfish is the opposite of what I regard as actually in the long-term self-interest of someone. I believe that the objective basis for morality is not the whims of God and not the public opinion poll or your emotional feelings and what you want, your whims of the moment. No, it's the long-term needs of your life. Human life on Earth is not automatic. It has certain specific requirements. Your well-being and happiness do depend upon consistently following certain principles. That's the power of philosophy, identifying those and acting on those with an objective basis. And my objective basis is my long-term well-being and survival. It should be yours, it should be everyone's. And since we're all human beings, some of these principles are universal and apply to all of us.
Mhm.
All of us. That's what ethics is. Ethics is the science, in my view, of achieving our long-term well-being in a principled way. That's a description, in effect, of what ethics is. And it tells you right there the importance. You can't be happy just by flipping coins and going by the emotions of the moment. You've got to have the long-term goal in mind. And I mean, think about it. Is this? Let me give you just one example, and then I'll shut up. Is
Yeah.
this bite of cake a value? Is it good? Well, I can't tell you that out of context of all my other values. Sure, that bite of cake will taste good, and I guess it'll give me some carbs, there's some energy in my body. But wait a minute, what if I'm a diabetic?
Right.
What if I've already eaten the whole cake and I'll get a stomach ache tomorrow if I have that one last bite?
Right.
Or what if I'm so there's the stomach ache, the diabetic. I have to watch my weight. And, I don't think we should be eating a lot of carbs. I think as I get older, especially, I want to control my metabolism, so I reduce the sugar in my diet. To answer even the question of whether this one bite of cake is a value, I've got to consider all the other values in my life, my health, my well-being, how I feel, my long-term health. And in order to coordinate all that knowledge, it's a feat of thought and integration. It is possible, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen. Absolutely, it is possible, but only philosophy can do that. And what I need is principles that I can be consistent with, adhere to, that I know will best ensure my long-term survival and happiness. These include, by the way, respecting the rights of other people.
Yes.
If I want to be free, if I want to be free, I need to respect your equal and everyone else's equal right to freedom. In fact, if I want to get the maximum benefit from our relationship, I've got to let you be free.
Yes.
The slave relationship is going to shut down your mind. Even if I was your master and you were my slave, I would get less. I would selfishly get less from the relationship than I could if you were a free person. And it is philosophy that answers these kind of questions. To maximize the benefit I get from people, they need to be free. To maximize my long-term benefit, the operation of my own mind, my basic tool of survival, I need to be free. We can get into those issues if you want, but in effect, what I'm saying is philosophy is the most important subject. It's inescapable. It has life and death consequences. And yeah, questions like this what is in my selfish interest can only be answered, and achieving our success in the
Right.
long run can only be answered by the subject of philosophy.
Right. And while you can't escape the need of philosophy, you can't live any sort of life of survival, let alone thriving without thinking. As Dr. Leonard Peikoff said, again, another one of my favorite quotes is, "There's no problem that can withstand the power of sustained thinking." And I've seen that in my life. When I first, started reading, objectivism, about 25 years ago. It's been a long, long process. Might have understood things intellectually, but it took a long time for me to integrate. And as I've lived, and I've also, this is something else too, is I think a lot of young men in particular feel that they need to have all the answers. And so, I see this in friends of mine, that they'll glom onto a religion or a politics, which is sort of becoming a secular religion now. And they say, okay, I know this now. I know this, and it will give me all the answers. All the while, they're 22 years old, have no life experience, but they have all the answers. And
Oh boy, I was.
and the more I went out
Yeah.
and tried things, made the wrong choices, sometimes misintegrated, it would knock me back to reality, and I would think, and sometimes it would take years before I would understand. Oh, you didn't even realize you were rationalizing, or I didn't even realize I was compartmentalizing, and that's why certain things didn't work. And then when I got the opportunity to really think over time over why something didn't work, a relationship failed, a friendship fizzled, some type of a creative venture didn't work. Over time, just sort of gnawing at it and sometimes putting it away and taking it back and just gnawing and thinking and thinking. I got perspective on it. And I do think a lot of these things, so whether it be objectivism or I guess maybe almost any rational philosophy, it's not going to be automatic. It doesn't work that way. You have to think, you have to try, you have to experience, you have to perceive, conceive, and live life to really understand and grapple and execute, philosophy in your life, I think.
Oh, my brother, in Hollywood, you in particular have to have a long-term perspective.
Man,
Writers, writers in Hollywood, actors, oh my gosh, in Hollywood, have to be able to take 10,000 no's to hope for the hope that they'll get one or two yeses.
Right.
And talk about having to stick to your long-term goals and be long-term in your thinking. You in particular are in such a field where you really have to be principled. Keep the because it's hard to keep that alive as you're
Oh,
getting no after no after no in one of those kind of professions like you have. And when I think about about young men, and I do see them adrift. And what we need philosophy, and we don't need some ancient, out of date, hoary, old, dusty thing that doesn't work. It was designed thousands of years ago. Nor, on the other hand, do we need to liberate our male instincts, with all due respect to Mr. Tate, and
right.
be just as boorish with women as possible. No, we need moral principles to guide us and
Right.
to guide us really in our lives if we're going to be successful as boyfriends or husbands, or if we're going to be successful in our career and achieve our long-term goals, if we're going to be able to do that moral judgment that's most important of all, the one in the mirror, the one in the
Absolutely.
mirror, then what we need is a philosophy. To do our best in life, is hard enough, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel 100 times. There is all kinds of great wisdom out there that can help young people.
Hmm.
Now, yeah, did you and I have to make certain mistakes on our own? And everyone's going to have to make mistakes on their own. But believe me, philosophy can provide enormous guidance from the outset and prevent you from making mistakes that you don't have to make,
Right.
and help clarify how you get the high goals that we also want to have, and to give us the confidence in our own judgment. See, to know that we got to have our epistemology,
Right.
how we know things straight, the confidence in our values, what is good and bad, and why I'm doing what I'm doing, making sure I know what I'm doing is right and good in the long run. To do that, we need philosophy, and we need to think, and we need to use reason. It is a science. It is a science that needs to be studied. You don't have to be a professional. You don't have to go get a degree in philosophy and make that your life. But it's the one subject, as I say, that's inescapable for everybody. So to some degree, if you're going to, as I think we all realize, we need to chuck the Bible. Think of the monstrous stuff in the Bible. I just want to point this out. People, it shows how bankrupt philosophy is that people are still going by the Bible, because the Bible says we execute by stoning homosexuals. Slavery is a cool thing.
Right.
Um, when you've got a morality like that, it's time to kick the Bibles to the curb, and start developing with our own minds, as a science, like we would any other science, the subject of philosophy, because it's essential. And young men today are cast adrift because we've lost those traditional answers without
Right.
providing a substitute. And that substitute does, of course, create depression. I'm rudderless. I'm
Right.
without guidance. And all these guys that are being brought up without dads, for example. Remember my thing about my dad. I had a great dad, and part of the reason why I am as put together well as I am is because I had a great dad, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate that these guys, not only are they in a modern world that is sort of in moral crisis, I would say, but they really have no moral guidance of even the older ideas being passed on from a dad or a granddad or an uncle or something. Just
I
my dad.
think to
Think it
that,
through.
not to interrupt, that's something that uh, it's front and center in my life. That my parents started divorcing when I was 8, finished divorcing when I was 11. My mom pretty much became kind of already was an addict. I didn't notice it until I was a certain age, and my dad kind of just disappeared when I was 11. I didn't see him again until 32, and I realized now sort of a preoccupation. I don't know if it's a preoccupation or maybe intense interest in things like morality, which I went back to religion for a large period of time in my teens, and for the express purpose of basically praying for my mom in the hopes that God would cure her or help her see the error of her ways. And I prayed more than a Muslim. I mean, I was raised Catholic, so I was doing that. I was going to church. I was burning candles. I was, praying all the time. But I prayed a lot, and it almost seemed that the more I did it, the worse she got. I know there's no connection there, But by the time I was 19, it just seemed like, okay, I'm like, okay, I guess so. He'll answer the prayers of my high school football team to win a game, but he won't answer any of the prayers I've been making every day from the age of 8 to the age of like 16 at that time. I'm like,
You got to
this,
wonder
you know,
God's priorities. You really do.
consciously, I think I realized, like, you know what? There might not be anybody there. I get to the age of 19 and I start digging into philosophy. And I, it was, again, I kind of, stumbled across the work of Ayn Rand. And I actually came to her through her philosophy first. I remember I was at Barnes and Noble in Joliet, Illinois, and I was just thumbing through philosophy. And I had heard about the Fountainhead, I heard about Atlas Shrugged, and I was just thumbing through the books with her name on it, and I saw this book called The Virtue of Selfishness, speaking of selfishness. And I'm like, wow, that is a ballsy title. I snatched it up and I devoured it cover to cover and read it and reread it. And I realized, she was in that book, she references characters from her fiction. And I'm like, I'm sure I would probably understand this better. I better fit. So boom. And I gobbled up as much as I could at that point and and kept going. And it was so interesting that she kind of gave me permission to just let it go. And when I say it, I mean religion, this belief. And it on the one hand, it was incredibly scary. I remember being in my dorm at the University of Illinois at Chicago and grappling with some of the things that she'd written and really thinking about them because I had such an idea in my head that if God doesn't exist, doesn't that mean that good doesn't exist? And that, again, I continued to read her and I realized no, that which is the good is that which sustains and defends life itself. Going into again your epistemology, applying to the metaphysical reality, and then developing a system of ethics and all that. And she just made it so easy to flip away from that because I know a lot of people that weren't able to do it. And I felt for the first time in my life that I was able to just let go of whatever was going on with my mom, that I wasn't going to save her, that she had free will, like I had free will. And it was okay for me to let go of that and start living and building my own life because it's how you live. It's like this is life is all. And that's where our ethics are derived from. And it was just incredible. Just, talk about, Chicago, we're the city of big shoulders. It was nice to drop those big shoulders and just take all of that off, that you're carrying. Because, children into adulthood, we carry on as if you have a parent that's an addict. So much of you want to help them. And so it was a huge gift. One of the many gifts I got from studying her philosophy that I could just let go and live my own life. That I didn't have to castigate myself. I didn't have to believe that it was happening because I was a bad person. And
Well,
so
religion gives you all this unearned guilt. I mean,
right.
Christianity,
Yeah.
we're all born in sin. Every time Jesus said, "You've heard it say, thou shalt not kill." I tell you, if you feel anger in your heart, you've already sinned. You've heard it say, "Thou shalt not commit adultery." I tell you, if you feel lust in your heart, you've already. Wait a minute here.
Yeah.
If I'm damned for my emotion, we're all sinners. We're all corrupt. We're all in need of someone to die for us. We're so in need of corruption. We need this guy to be crucified to redeem us. All this unearned guilt is just put on you. You can't make anyone else happy. You can't make her change her life. She's making her own choices, and you've got to realize she's an independent agent, and I can't feel guilty because she's committing suicide. And there's really little I can do to stop that. Now, again, thinking it through is the key. Young people, when you were young, you thought about religion. I went through a religious phase when I was very young. Absolutely. Young people you notice why young people are so interested in philosophy, whether it's religion or some philosophical, you picked up virtue of selfishness when you started looking at, I need an answer here. Young
Right.
people are hungry for philosophical answers. That's when we're curious about these things. We know ideas are important. They're going to shape our lives. And guess what? Young people's instinct here is right. Instinct, I mean, in the broad term. Their intuition is absolutely correct here. If the Bible can no longer provide us with answers. See, and secular philosophers have done such a terrible job. There was this
Yes.
famous philosopher guy named David Hume,
Hmm.
who was 1700s, and he said there can be no objective ethics. That there you could not derive an ought from an is, to use his famous phrase. And secular philosophers since then have been nearly 100% uniform agreement with him. There is no such thing as an objective ethics. So you ask the question, can there be ethics without God? Well, there was this famous Russian conservative novelist named Fyodor Dostoevsky who famously asks the question, without God, why be moral? Because that's the setup. The
Right.
religious people say, yeah, only God can give us morality. And guess what? Most of our new atheist philosophers and all of our secular philosophers since Hume pretty much have said, yeah, that's right. It's all a question of your feelings, your whims, your emotions, or it's a question of some built-in conscience. Well, that's just what the Christians say.
Right.
Humans
Right.
have a built-in conscience. For we were human sacrificers and
Right.
cannibals for thousands upon thousands of years back in our anthropological history. Slavery was the norm until only 150, 200 years ago, even in the civilized world. No, humans have, like I say, they're born totally ignorant, pooping their pants. We've got to learn everything, including morality, including how to know. And the question of how to know and what our values are have to be answered. The great failure of the new atheists has been to give an objective morality. And Ayn Rand, as you point out, is just about the only one who even tried. And guess what? She did it. She
Right.
understood where values come from in reality. She turned
Right.
ethics into a science. She made life, human life, the standard of moral value, an objective standard of moral value. That which is good for humans is the good. That
Absolutely.
which is bad for human life is the bad, objectively.
And
And that's what we've needed desperately. And that's without that, that's what sets young people adrift
right.
in our current society.
Well,
We've lost
so
the old without.
without exposure to rational philosophy, well, it seems, and I can understand to an extent where, no matter your age, people checking out because maybe it's like, okay, what do I know? Okay, I was raised Catholic, or I was raised Jewish, or whatever it is. So it's like it's sort of the default is to fall back to that which we know. You look for answers. I didn't great. I talked with oblate priests for several years with school at UIC in Chicago. And I remember, and this was as I was discovering and reading Rand at the same time. And this was a man who, incredible human being, great guy. He was from South Africa, educated in Rome, just a brilliant, brilliant guy, oblate priest. And I would go hours talking over coffee and lunch. I mean, I'd bring this guy, we would talk, theology, philosophy, and all these things because at that point I was already turning towards Thomas Aquinas. I would like my confirmation name is Thomas or Thomas Aquinas. So there was that. And I remember just at one point I was devouring sleep, reading Rand and sort of the philosophers that were coming up kind of around her. At least at the time, I was just digging all the books out of the library that I could. And I remember I walked into Father Vaughn's office one morning, and because I realized that you know yeah, I had figured out, what, I don't believe in this anymore, and I'm not getting answers. And I said, and it was sort of like, I said, okay, Father, I need to know, is there some document, some piece of proof locked away in the Vatican somewhere that will tell me that God exists, that all of that is real? And he was so matter of fact about it. He spoke with sort of a more refined English accent. And he's like, well, of course not, my boy. That's why they call it faith. And I'm like, yeah, this is what Ayn Rand has been telling you for 4 books now. And then, Father Vaughn, I'm just like, okay. I'm like, okay, we cross-referenced that, and it was, and that was that. And ironically, here's what's interesting is I would run into him on the L train on the far north side of Chicago, like where the red line ends. I was riding heading from the far north side downtown, and I'm looking. I'm like, man, that guy looks like Father Vaughn. And I just kept peering forward, and I realized it was him. And so I got up and I walked over, and I reached my hand out because I failed to mention Father Vaughn was blind. He had cataracts, and he wasn't doing anything about it because of the twisted ethics of his order, of the Catholic Church. For him to take out surgery to get rid of his cataracts so that he could restore his vision was somehow seen as a negative. Well, I'm walking down the L train here, and I said, Father Vaughn, it's Kyle. I was like, it is. And I'm like, wait, how do you, and I realized he could see me. I'm like, he's like, I knew your voice, but I see you. He had left the order. He had left the church, and he had taken he basically rolled the dice on himself, and he become some type of researcher or something. And it was so interesting. This was maybe like 4 or maybe 6 years later, and it was so interesting that at the time I was experiencing my own sort of intellectual, philosophical, moral enlightenment. He was as well. He was right behind me. And I just found that to be really interesting. That people that you think that so locked in. Like, I have some very close young friends that are very religious, and I don't know why these guys are attracted to being a friend of mine because I don't. I'm like, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to tell you I believe. You know, I mean, I'm always going to be straight with you. Keep coming back. So I don't know, but it's interesting that someone like Father Vaughn, whom to me was just like, I'm like, this guy's going to die with the collar on. There's no way. Ended up, he's like, nope. He was done with it. He went, he got a surgery. He restored his vision. He was a teacher, became a lecturer, some type of researcher. And so you never know. And I wasn't really able to.
Human beings do have this choice of thought, this capacity of choice, yeah. And
But
thought, it gets harder as we get older. I think
life,
my experience is as people get older, they get more set in their ways. And if they don't have a clear philosophy, they just get more cynical. That's just the world. Things just don't work out. Theory never, practice never matches theory. You can never, in effect, we're kind of doomed. They have to develop this very cynical attitude because working operative philosophy they sort of tossed together in their youth didn't sort of pan out, and so they become very cynical. They tend to become also set in their ways. If they're religious, it's harder and harder to get them off that thing. That's why I'm so impressed with this priest, because we do. Some of the most heroic people I've ever known are people who, middle-aged people, have totally had revelations, changed their life. Oh my gosh, I was wrong about this. Um, Now the question of what are religious people when they find your religious friends? I don't mean to judge them negatively because they are aware and they feel the awareness of the need for philosophy. These are people who are in desperate need of a philosophy. They're aware of that need for a philosophy. Unfortunately, what I would say is that they're the sort of, if they become seriously religious in our modern age, then what they're doing is turning their minds over to some authority rather than having the confidence in their own mind. And the chief culprit there, modern secular philosophers who have given them no confidence in their own rational capacity, their ability to think, their own individual worth, or given them any sense of objective values. If secular philosophy had done its job and not been in the complete bankrupt state it is today, we would have an answer to provide to people who feel the need for understand the importance of philosophy, feel that need, and yet are unwilling to surrender their minds to some ancient authority, God, the Pope, you name it.
I was so, again, going back to my early years in college. Obviously I was sort of drifting away from religion because so many of my questions were never adequately answered. My prayers were never answered. The method by which I was taught to make the world better, make myself better, make my mother better, and not ill, just it all sort of just never worked. But what was also very clear to me was that what would become postmodern, what's sort of been unleashed on the world now, there not being any meaning, being no objectivity, there being no fact, there being unless it's what we say. I remember seeing that in the university 20 years ago, and it's for people I remember realizing, I'm like, okay, that's death right there. It's another form of living. My being a Catholic and rejecting life and rejecting the things that I love that brought me happiness and that brought me joy and that fulfilled me. What and this is the thing where I understand why people maybe lose hope, because they're told by religion to reject themselves, to reject the goodness in the world, to reject happiness, to reject their reason. But a lot of secular philosophy is the exact same thing. So we take away Jesus, we take away Moses, we take away whatever that is, we take away the myth, but the ethics is still intact. Self-denial, self-sacrifice, happiness is wrong, values are unachievable.
Notice that they'll
Knowledge is
reject
wrong.
metaphysical, the magical metaphysical stuff of religion,
Yeah.
but they'll keep the ethics intact, and that's interesting. Christianity's ethics is like that. Are the if you look at hardcore Marxism, for example, which is atheistic technically and materialistic technically, they're really quite religious in their approach, frankly, mystical in their approach.
You,
But
you can't slaughter tens of millions of people without having some type of a religious hold on people.
Exactly. And the ethics of it comes straight from Christianity. It's the same. I mean, the apostles in the New Testament hold all their property in common. Wealth is cursed in the New Testament all over the place. And so this anti-materialist, altruistic, we exist for everyone else, comes
Right.
from Christianity.
Yes. Yeah.
Marxism, you'll hear idiots on both sides in Capitol Hill arguing over who owns Jesus. Oh no,
Right.
we Democrats with our welfare own Jesus because he helped the poor. Oh no, we Republicans with our traditional values, we own Jesus. What that tells me is that we have ethically evolved very little from the ethics of Christianity, and it is time. And I regard, and I don't want to be super controversial here, but I regard the ethics of Christianity as articulated in the New Testament as downright evil, evil.
Well,
Submitting
yeah. How could you possibly practice it? I mean,
You can't.
and
That's the whole
right.
point. You're headed to hell if you don't have this arbitrary grace from Jesus because you happen to believe. Now, if you don't happen to believe something, mind you, you're going to burn in a lake of unquenchable fire for all eternity just because you don't believe something. That's what got me off. I mean, I was like,
Oh
off
yeah.
of religion. I mean, come on. You're saying because I'm using this rationality that God presumably gave me, and I come to a different conclusion, but my belief should be a matter of rewards or not belief. That should be
Well,
about my judgment and the evidence. And that's what killed it for
yeah,
me.
you should be a good person for the sake of being a good person. And this is where I get in so many arguments with my young religious friends. Is so you're telling me the only reason you don't murder, you pillage, you don't force yourself on women, only reason you're not doing that is because if you do, you'll be cast into a lake of fire for all of eternity. Interesting. I arrived at it this way. I've reasoned that I have a life that is my own, and so does everyone else. I trade with them value for value to achieve my values, to sustain my life. And the reason I don't lie, cheat, steal, kill, rape, whatever, because it's wrong, because I'm injuring that other person's life that is not mine. I don't need to have Skyfather there to tell me. It's better for me to be able to reason and to arrive that in reality I do not have a right to injure people. I do not have a right to make a moral claim on somebody else's life.
I
That
think
makes way more sense
I
than,
think
because what happens if the person who's interpreting God decides to interpret him in a way that says, "Oh yeah, go right ahead, kill those people." It's like, well, it
right.
seems a little malleable there, and that's
Well,
not.
let me give you an example from Genesis in the Bible that Jews and Christians share. God told Abraham to go kill his son, Isaac, to sacrifice him. And it was a test of faith. And Abraham was expected to do this. And his obedience to God was being tested there. So you've got to be willing to be a moral person. You've got to be willing to obey God no matter what God tells you. If God tells you to murder a child, you've got to go. You just got to bite the bullet and go murder a child if God tells you to do so. So wait a minute here. Whatever God tells me to do, you're doing it simply because God tells me. And if I go by the Bible, God is telling me to do some pretty horrific things. God tells people tells King Saul to go commit genocide on the Amalekites. the babies, the slaves, the animals, wipe them all out. Wow, that's a heck of an evil God from
Right.
that perspective. So obviously that's not going to be the source of moral answers. But nor is going by the seat of our pants and our emotions. People seem to think that if I just do what I feel is right. No, sometimes our feelings can be wrong. Our feelings, we can't just trust our feelings when it comes to certain things. We have to be able to think through with reason and to develop principles that are consonant with our long-term self-interest, with the needs of human life on Earth. And if we can do that in a self-conscious, scientific way, develop principles, those can help shape our emotions. Now, we have made moral progress so that our natural emotions are better, say, than our ancestors were. For example, our ancestors would have had no problem with, say, degrees of child abuse or slavery or stoning people for sex crimes, say. We have morally developed, it seems to me. But nonetheless, we don't have a systematic justification for that moral development. And
Right.
so people say, well, I've got this built-in conscience. I should go by what I feel is right. Well, a lot of times that works, but you can't know. A lot of times that doesn't work. For a long time in human history, it felt good to do very bad things. In fact, let me make a general point. There are evil people in this world. They hate their life, and all they want to do is cause destruction around them. But they're a very small minority. Most of the time, to get large groups of people to do horrific things, the Holocaust, communist dictatorship, if they're slaughtering millions of people, or if the Christians are engaged in an inquisition or some crusade or something, they're doing it because they believe they're morally justified. To get people en masse to do horrifically bad things, they've got to think that what they're doing is morally idealistic. And most of the time in history, the evil that has been committed has been done out of, believe it or not, moral idealism. This
Right.
is why we cannot just trust our emotions. It may feel good to just get revenge on someone. It may feel good to, no. Your actual long-term well-being has to be thought through in a principled, rational way. This is why ethics and philosophy in general must be treated like a science and rationally. We do not have innate moral consciences, a superego, as Freud might say, that will always be a correct guide. No, no, nor can we trust ancient authorities like the Bible. This requires the science of ethics. This requires reason.
And it's interesting, you said that beautifully. Something that I have friends that lean obviously one side or the other, right or left, and I'll see them occasionally sympathize with propositions that I understand per philosophy. Okay, yeah, the logical outcome of that is not good either way, and so I do what I can to explain to them. I'm like, okay, you can't force your particular values onto people. All you can do is allow people to. You must allow people their rightful freedom and self determination to discover their own values. And if those values don't line up with yours, then tough noogies, man, because you have to let those people figure it out for them. Like again, I have friends that again on both sides somehow seem uh, they see some value in me. I think maybe it's the debate, the arguing, but also like I tell them, I'm like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that's a good idea. You know that the road to hell is paved with those good intentions of those policies you're talking about. Or okay, you're basically saying because we've always done this, we should just keep doing it. Tradition over here, or again the poisonous self on the other. And I tell them, I'm like, okay, I know that you pray like in your everyday, you have to think about where you're going to get through the day. You have to think about, okay, what should I be eating now? What action do I have to take in terms of making my money that day? Now just apply that to everything, and you could live an even better life. We could all be living a much better life, much more rational
The
existence.
analogy I draw on the objectivity of ethics is health. Just as our body has certain requirements, so our psychology, our minds, if you will, our souls have certain requirements. I need to be able to have integrity of thought and confidence in what I'm doing mentally. I need to have principles that can help guide my action and actually guide my action. I need to have confidence in those. You see, that's all the difference in the world, is being self-conscious and deliberate about the philosophy, or because we can't, like I said, you can't escape it, or
Right.
just absorbing it by osmosis from the world around us. The importance about respecting other people's judgment and their right to be wrong is something I wanted to return to. If I were to point a gun at you, Kyle, I could probably get you to say anything I wanted you to say. You know, the moon is made of green cheese. Say it, Kyle. Okay, you've got a gun pointed at me. The moon is made of green cheese.
Right.
Can I make you believe in the privacy of your own thoughts that the moon is actually made of green cheese?
Right.
No, the mind cannot be forced. The mind judgment is a question of internal confidence. And you either decide it inside, I believe this because I'm confident about the evidence and the logic, or I just emotionally decide it because I'm going to believe it, but it's inside your mind you're making the judgment. And no gun can force it. More than that, more
Right.
than that. If I point a gun at a room full of people, there's only one person whose rational judgment matters, the guy with the gun.
Right.
Everyone else sort of has to obey. Their creative intellect, their mind is shut down. The reason why freedom works, let me put it this way: a world that had censorship would be culturally sterile and stagnant. To
Yes.
be only a creative, vibrant, dynamic culture that's going to make progress is one where all the minds are as free as possible to be creative and different. Creativity means the capacity to be different. Similarly, with science and technology, you've got to be able to take risks, mental risks, test
Mm.
hypotheses. Freedom is intimately connected to human progress. Why? Because it liberates the mind. The mind is our most fundamental tool of survival. And freedom is its basic social condition for operation. Force and mind are opposites. To the
Yes.
degree that there's force, we shut down reason. To the
Mm.
degree that people are free, that is to say, freedom requires that there be no coercion, that we ban physical force, that people not be able to point guns or clubs. But
Right.
when people are free from coercion from one another, then I get the benefit of your maximum reason. And you get the benefit of my maximum reason, not to mention the fact that we're each now liberated to act on our own judgment as our natures require. My reason is my basic tool of survival. You interfere with that, it's like hacking away at a baby bird's wings.
Right. Right. It's something that I really try to stay away from our current, toxic contemporary politics, because I feel that any time that I spend on that, I'm not saying that politics isn't important, but you can't affect culture in a positive way at the level of politics, because as we know, qua objectivism, that politics is the final outcome of a given culture's total sum intellectual and philosophical trends. So I try to stay away from it as much as I can with my writing or my creativity, but also because I value my life and my mind in such a way that I love being able to sort of craft my own world where I disappear into, not even disappear. Disappear is the wrong word. I can engage spiritually, and by spiritually I mean the mind, with the films of Andrei Tarkov. I can reread them. I can dig into one of my favorite Japanese manga, that probably, I don't know how many people know, they know the film Akira, the animated film from the 80s, but there's like 6 phone book size comics basically of that story. I feel like maybe that's the way I kind of reach my younger friends, because we do convene in the realm of film. I recently introduced a good friend of mine to Blade Runner, and I wasn't sure how he was going to react to it. I regard Blade Runner as one of the greatest films of all time. It's essentially philosophical. It asks the question, what is a human being? What does it mean to be human, and so on. Despite the fact that I am an objectivist, he is a Christian. The amazing conversations we've had as a result of that movie have really been so fun. And this is where, again, philosophy, there's the philosophy of art, and that has helped me reach people who on paper really don't vibe with me. So again, I try to avoid the politics because the contemporary politics is it's hard to reach anybody, whether they're on the left, depending on how far they are left or right. It's very difficult to. It's like, well, what about what he did? Well, what about what he did? That's like, okay, never mind. Let's watch Blade Runner. Let's talk about life. What it means to be
Well,
human.
you're right about several things. I have psychotherapist friends, and what's really one of the more depressing stories they tell are people who come in saying, "I'm so distressed at the state of politics," or "I'm so distressed at the state of the world that I can't be a happy person." And the therapist will say, "Well, are you happy with your partner?" "Oh yeah, we're closer and happier than ever." "Oh well, how are things going at work?" "Oh gosh, I was so proud of what I did last." So the person saying, "Wait. Can you still have fun and enjoy music?" "Yes." "Okay, then maybe politics is occupying a little too much of your brain space there. Your own life is more important, folks, and your own happiness. If you're worried about politics to the point that you're becoming miserable and depressed, then it's too much." Now, I
Right.
am probably into politics and focus on politics a lot more than you do, but I absolutely agree with you. Politics is intellectually downstream from ethics.
Right.
I was talking about how they fight right and left fight over the Bible. And if they're not fighting over the Bible, then they're totally unscrupulous pragmatists over here with the modern philosophical justifications for that. So politics is in a miserable state today because philosophy, deeper philosophy, is again, just like individuals are rudderless when it comes to ethics. So our
Right.
politics is becoming rudderless as well and subject of depression for a lot of people. I try to bring sort of a philosophical approach to it, and I
Sure.
try to say, because look, someone's got to do this ugly job
Yeah.
out there. I'll quote Ayn Rand: "The reason why I'm interested in politics is so that one day I won't have to really be interested in politics, even knowing it won't happen in my lifetime." But
Amen.
but you're absolutely right. Look, we can have friends, we can watch movies, we can go have fun. Our life should not be wrapped up in the state of the world. Which, let me put it this way: politics will fall as philosophy goes. The cutting
Right.
edge ideas of tomorrow will become the commonplace accepted truths of the cutting edge truths of today will become the commonplace truths of tomorrow. And this is how philosophy shapes politics itself. But politics is itself simply the result of cultural ideas as they get inculcated in an earlier philosophical stage of what Ayn Rand would call the hierarchy of our knowledge. Let me put it that way. So we're going to need philosophical change in order
Well,
to have political
again,
change.
I'm going to be very clear that I'm not anti-politics. I'm not against talking about it. I do think it is occupying way too much bandwidth in a person's life. Definitely occupying too much bandwidth in social media. And at the same time, I will also admit it's important. The laws that are passed and the freedoms that are either expanded or abridged. All of this is intensely important. So I've learned too that when these questions do come up, when I have friends telling me you need to care about this or you should think this way about this issue, and I come at it again in a way that you do. It's like, okay, well, okay, what you need to define your terms. What are we talking? What are your principles? And does it make sense? Like, if we pass this law, if we this policy, what effect does it have on people's individual rights, their ability to be free and self-determine and discover their own values free of force? Because if it has a negative effect on any of those things, you lost me. Sorry. And so
Well, see,
that's the
that's
approach that
pretty
I try to.
radical ideas. And one of the reasons why Ayn Rand is so criticized is because, of course, the conservatives hate her because she was an atheist.
Right.
The liberals hate her because she defended the free market. Everyone hated her because she advocates this virtue of selfishness that you mentioned earlier, because they don't understand her concept of selfishness. And yeah, my politics are pretty radical and they're out there, and I know they won't be achieved within my lifetime. And the world is, in my view, going to hell in a handbasket. That does not prevent me from having a happy life. But
Yes.
both issues, both issues are critically dependent upon philosophy. My own happiness internally depends on my ability to have my philosophy straight and consistent and not have it be a grab bag of social pressures or ancient religious ideas or whatever I've absorbed from the culture around me. My happiness depends on it. Just putting this in context like we did involves sort of a philosophical judgment, but
Absolutely.
also the political condition of the world depends on better philosophical ideas. So philosophy is the name of the game, folks.
Right. No, and it's something, again, I know that I think one of the frustrations of, I just watched Don Watkins' lecture from Ocon, the most recent Ocon, about how to be an earthly idealist, and he talks about how, and it's something that I can do, again, having studied objectivism, sometimes very intensely and sometimes more 25 years, is it's not going to be a big, it's not a list of orders. It is to understand these philosophical tenets, principles, and then you apply your mind as best you can to the world and figure out your own values and so on. And that's not easy. One of the things that is probably the most frustrating part of being objectivist is that, and it doesn't happen often because I don't really wear it on my sleeve. I just live my life, which is the entire point. Following a philosophy of living on Earth is to go live on Earth. But every now and then, I'll write something and someone will say, "You like Herbert?" Yeah, and well, I know that's garbage philosophy or whatever, and I'll defend it. And what 99% of the time, I find that it's always their understanding or of Rand, her work, is almost always secondhanded. Ayn Rand is well known without being known well, and
Yeah,
and again, here's the thing: I've also met people that have read a few of her books or whatever, and for whatever reason they don't like her, and I'm like, you know what? I have a lot more respect for that than the person that allows themselves to be told what she is without having first-handedly read her. So again, people should use their own judgment, but it's
our own lives. It's all about living our own. Philosophy is a tool. It's technology. It's it's like learning auto mechanics for an auto mechanic. Only we're humans, and philosophy is the technology that all humans need, simply because they're human beings. So we got to each figure it out for ourselves. There's no guru out there. Whatever argument Ayn Rand makes, I've got to know it's true with my own judgment. And believe me, I have certain disagreements, not about philosophical principles. I think on all the important principles, I'm on all fours with her because I took the trouble to understand her. But on the other hand, I have plenty of differences with her. And in fact, the first thing Ayn Rand tells you is think for yourself. There's no substitute for that, and that's what we got to do. It's you and reality. It's the relationship here that's the important one to work out, and no one can be out there. No authority.
You take those tools of the philosophy and you apply them, and I don't like Rachmaninoff. I would much rather listen to James Brown. I'm not. I can't say I don't like Tiddly music.
Well, if I can use the health analogy,
I much rather Zeppelin.
Analogy. Objectively, we can say certain things are true and good for all human beings, just as I can say it's important that you get a certain amount of protein or vitamins in your diet. But I could say for all humans, no one should drink radiator fluid. Everyone should avoid radiator fluid. On the other hand, that doesn't take away individual differences. Say someone's got a peanut allergy. I would say that person, it would be wrong for them to eat peanuts, but that's true only for them. Whereas the radiator fluid, the respect for reason and reality, say, a love and respect for life as the standard of our values, those things are universal, and I think are universally applicable. They're like the radiator fluid, if you will. So I think
the point that I made,
but that has to take into account the huge. That's why another reason why freedom is so important. It has to take into account the huge variety that individuals bring to it, their own objective, particular needs and values.
right, and I absolutely right. I make the point too when I feel I have friends that again that lean one way or the other are going a little too far. I like to make this point to them all the time that okay, you can be a gun enthusiast, hunt with 3 gun safes full of various firearm property there in Wyoming or wherever you have, and never bother another human being. Go out, hunt your deer, do your target shooting, go to work, take care of your family, and then you can have say, a person who is a transgender club owner in New York, Chicago, LA, where they do drag shows in the evening and body humor, and you can live that life and run your business, your club, doing shows. Those people have nothing whatsoever to do with each other. They have every right to continue to live the lives that they have self-determined as their own values, as what is most important to them. Only if one attempts to make a claim on the other, to either force somebody to go to said drag show, or to force someone to not be able to hunt deer to feed their family, only then do we have a problem. But these people who on paper seem completely diametrically opposed really aren't. They're human that have been able to determine for themselves the life they want to live through discovering their values, through being free and unencumbered in life. They never have to meet each other. They never have to bother each other. And I hate when contemporary politics tries to pit these people against each other, because they're not enemies.
Yeah, folks out there, if you ever even psychologically find yourself saying, I wish I could force this value of mine on other people, check your premises. And let's talk about this word force. It is the problem. It is the all adult human interaction, if it's to be moral, must be voluntary. Must be voluntary. All human interaction, this is one of the great moral revolutions that Ayn Rand, I think, set out, and why she is such a moral revolution. The good cannot be forced. The mind cannot be forced. People have to be free, except insofar as they initiate force, violence, coercion against another human being. That is the one thing that justifies the use of force. The only moral use of force is in response, retaliation, self-defense. The initiation of physical force is always wrong, because all human relationships must be voluntary. And if human relationships are all voluntary, then we are free. And guess what? Both may be wrong, and reality will teach us. One of us may be wrong, one of us may be right. But guess what? Reality will be the final arbiter of our dispute. We've got to be free to use our own judgment, the basic tool of our own survival. As you point out, freedom and a respect for someone else's freedom is absolutely essential, not only to my freedom, but to my getting the most I can from living in society as such. Your freedom is, humans have a very distinct need for freedom, but it is like the air they breathe. It is the oxygen of the fire of progress. Without freedom, the embers go dead, whether in society or in our own soul. Let me just put it that way. Encourage your own uniqueness, your own distinction, so long as I'm not forced to go along with your proposal and you're not forcing someone else to go along with your proposal. People should be free.
Right. And the only way, I think, if you're somebody out there who isn't happy or is disaffected by, traditional philosophy qua religion, or a lot of these, current secular philosophies that just tell you to distrust your own mind, reality, and to make you feel just as miserable, start looking into rational philosophy, despite what you've probably been told. And I realize this is me selfishly saying, check her out because she's impacted my life for the better, or not. I mean, I'm sure there are ways to be a secular person and not necessarily be an objectivist, and to do those things, but to have the strength of character to, okay, yeah, this is not the life I want to live. I'd like to live better, and start reading and start checking, out different ideas, and use your own best judgment. Down a path of self-sacrifice, or leading you down on a path to be miserable, then chuck that book and find another. But
no authority over your own mind. Place no authority over your own mind, not the opinion of others, not some God, what someone tells you God's saying. Your mind is it, and your judgment, and place no authority higher than that. That is key to life.
Absolutely. That's I think that's a great place to wrap up. It's another favorite, on exactly what you said. One of my favorite quotes from Thomas Paine is, "My mind is my own church." And I know that he wasn't, obviously as consistent as maybe he could have been. But yeah, your mind should be your own church. Nothing of your own judgment and your own reasoning. You may not reason correctly. You might make a mistake, but if you're being honest, you can arrive at the right answers for your life, right, Jim?
Mistake using my own judgment because at least I have the capacity to correct it left. I haven't turned my mind over to the hawk shop of authority and let them do my thinking for me. At least I still have the capacity to think.
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. Man, Jim, this has been great. This has been everything I hoped it would be. In terms of people wanting to hear more from you, see more, where can people find you, Jim?
Well, I'm very active on Facebook and on social media. I'm there almost every day answering questions. I am
You-
very I so yeah, and I run certain pages at Facebook. I am also very active in doing podcasts for the Ayn Rand Center, United Kingdom. We do podcasts every day, and I'm on a whole bunch of them. I also do a whole bunch of podcasts in the ancient history of religion field. I've written two books. One was on the origins of Christianity. One was on the Ayn Rand biographies. And so in both areas, I'm very, very active. My book on Christianity, we have a website, www.creatingchrist.com. Check us out there. You can get in touch with me there. Or as I say, on Facebook, I help administer the oldest and biggest Ayn Rand fan page on Facebook. Check me out there. But otherwise, it's through
One more,
Jennifer.
one more. There's one more where I see you all the time. YouTube. All of your, a lot of your podcasts, the ARC UK, and the historical history of religion podcasts, and all of your interviews are all on YouTube. That's where I see most of you, and I would imagine that's probably where a lot of our audience will find you. But Jim speaks on a variety of topics, so he's always interesting, no matter what. So,
It helps to be omniscient, you know. I'm by no means omniscient, and I do make plenty of mistakes, but I have a lot of YouTube stuff out there. You could probably find me talking, shooting my mouth off about just about anything.
never dull, always interesting, and I really enjoyed having you today, Jim. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This is wonderful.
Great, great.